Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today at our VMware What's Happening Since the Broadcom Acquisition webinar that we promised you today. I'd like to introduce our guest here. Today we have Matt Yette, our Director of Technology. He's here to advise you on some of the changes and help you with understanding how to move forward through these constant and evolving ups that we're getting. And Doug Brown, our Senior Account Manager, he's handled a lot of VMware licensing concerns over the years and has worked extensively with the VMware field team to help customers optimize their VMware investment. And so he's got a great perspective on some of these changes as well.
Thanks for the intro, Connie. I just want to make note, I advertise this as a fireside chat. If anybody saw the little video clip that we've been doing before our Zoom meetings or something on LinkedIn, I promised fire and I brought the fire. I didn't want to necessarily be, accused of false advertising and all of that.
We appreciate that ambiance, Matt. Looks great. So just a little bit of housekeeping. You probably have noticed that you are muted and video is turned off, but please type your questions in the Q&A window so that we can address those either during the discussion or we can provide answers or follow up with you after the event. So make sure that you ask those questions, and no question is off limits, but we want to stay focused on the VMware strategy and the licensing questions that we're going to be covering during this event. So please let us know what your questions are and what your concerns are. So as we get into this, one thing that I will say, there was a lot of confusion when the Broadcom acquisition closed in November. Right away, VMware canceled their partner relationships, and there was a lot of confusion around who was still a partner and who could still offer VMware solutions. So I want to reassure you that IVOXY has always, long-term been a VMware partner, and we continue to be a VMware partner now. Many of you may not know that we were recently Partner of the Quarter for VMware here in the Pacific Northwest. So nothing is changing with our relationship with VMware. So we're happy to reassure you that moving forward, we are able to offer you all of the solutions that you may be interested from VMware by Broadcom moving forward, and make sure you know that IVOXY has had no changes to their partner status. But that brings us to, the first question that I have for our team is, what is the Broadcom strategy with VMware? And, we've gone from a whole slew of offerings to what was advertised as 4 solutions now, 4 offers from VMware. Is that something that you guys can help our audience understand?
Yeah, Connie, thanks. As Connie alluded to, I've been, 16 years in June, I've been with IVOXY. So, IVOXY was, VMware has been in our DNA since day one. So I've been, selling VMware and working with VMware for nearly 16 years. And as Connie alluded to, as VMware continued to evolve and change and broaden it, towards the end, it got unwieldy. They had so many different products, different SKUs, as I'm sure most of you guys have seen over the years. They might have a promo or a bundle where, hey, you upgrade to this license and you get this technology. So things have, most customers look at an install base and it's numerous different products. So the first thing that Broadcom, one of the first things that they did was, we're going to dramatically simplify and consolidate the licensing and the options. Now, with that being said, as everyone knows, VMware was was very late to moving to subscription-based licensing. So everything going forward, and it was a quick line in the sand. There's no perpetual licensing anymore. Everything is moving from a CPU-based license to a core-based subscription. So that's been a dramatic change very quickly. And then they have really simplified into, you know, as of today, kind of 4 different licensing options. You know, with VMware starting at the left, their strategy is all about, you know, building the private cloud, the hybrid model, and for them, it's what they call their cloud foundation suite, let's call it, and everything in blue you see there is all under that subscription offering, and it's really all the components for a customer to build their private cloud. Now, just because you have the subscription doesn't mean that's a trivial process. So there's obviously a lot to that, but it's got all the core components for a customer to build that out. You know, that journey is, for customers that are going to go that way, is not going to be quick and easy. But that's if you talk to anybody at VMware, that's their focus, and that's where they're going to want to start. I would say for most of my customers, and I would say most of who I'm working with, at least in the short term, they're probably going to fall under that foundation offering, which is your Enterprise Plus licensing. It's got the ARIA suite of operations management, including Log Insight, and it's got vSAN, and I would say it's got enough vSAN for customers to kind of start to play with it and see, is vSAN maybe do we have a use case for it? Is that maybe something going forward? It could be it could be something down the road. And I would say that's, again, where most customers initially are going to fall into. For
That's
smaller,
going to somewhat be the equivalent to what we've seen of the vSphere Enterprise Plus, what you might be familiar with out there. If you're a vSphere Enterprise Plus customer, the most similar lateral move would be vSphere Foundations, as you said, Doug. It comes with a sampling of vSAN capacity and the ARIA suite standard, which you may know as VROPS from the old days as well. So the vRealize Operations Monitoring Suite, now known as ARIA, that is bundled in with that as well.
Yeah, and within those first 2 suites, there are some, there are some options to add additional components to that. As you can see down at the bottom, if you need additional vSAN capacity, for example, VCDR, which is their DR, backup as a service offering, for customers that are in the NSX or the network security piece of that is an additional offering, but that's only if you're under the foundational platform. So there are some gotchas. We've tried to play with, well, if a customer has, they want Enterprise Plus capabilities, but they also want to do NSX for maybe some microsegmentation. Unfortunately, there are some limitations on where that goes. So you do need to be under that VCF suite to add some of those additional components and bits and pieces to that. For customers that have, maybe satellite office or use cases where Enterprise Plus from a vSphere is not required, we don't need DV switches, we don't need,
DRS.
DRS, there is a vSphere standard option as well, and that's all that subscription is and can be. You can't add any features or functionality on top of the vSphere standard. And then lastly is Essentials Plus, great use case for maybe small office robo type. The caveat there is it is capped at a 96 cores in that, whatever that size of that cluster is. So you start looking at, hey, I've got 3 servers out there, that's only 16 cores per CPU. So there's some limitations there that you have to be mindful of, and to be a question came up there today with a customer, and I don't know the answer, is they have 3 hosts in a Essentials Plus configuration today, but it's more than 96 cores.
Oh, it is, Doug. I can answer that.
Okay.
The Essentials Plus is sold in 96 core packs. Now, the real maximum number that holds everything back there, it's 3 hosts. That's it. You cannot apply 96 cores across 4 hosts, 5, whatever, 3 hosts. However, like you said, 96 divided by 3 times 2, assuming dual processor hosts, is 16 cores per. If you had, Matt, what happens if I have 20 cores on all 6 of those processors? You would buy an additional 96 core pack. You're still at 3 hosts, right? And that additional pack does not get you 3 more hosts. All of that has to go to the 3 hosts, but now you are entitled up to 192 cores across those 3 hosts. If you had 32, so that basically what that means is you're best off, if you have more than 16 cores, you're better off just having 32, because you're buying that many cores as well, 96 core packs of that Essentials Plus. So that's the limitation, is the number of hosts, but to add on more than 16 cores, to run more than 16 physical cores per socket, you would just buy an additional 96 core pack of Essentials Plus. That is the only SKU that's sold in that pack. Everything else is per core. With, obviously we'll talk about it later, the caveats of minimum cores per CPU. But yeah, that the only pack is sold as the Essentials Plus at 96 cores per.
Well, you guys bring up a good question here. With the licensing moving to more of a bundling of products rather than, all of the SKUs that were available before, is there an opportunity for a customer to replace some of the other products that they may have been purchasing with some of these bundles? Is that, maybe this is a good thing to kind of bring things into a more simple licensing strategy?
I was on the phone with a customer just recently, and we were just looking at the foundation platform that right there in the middle, and for them, Enterprise Plus customer today, they were using a third-party product for some operations management type monitoring, and a product they were using for some of their logging. So for that customer, there certainly is an opportunity, because with these bundles, you use it or lose it. I mean, it's in your subscription, so rather you use it or don't use it, it's there. So I would certainly say for some customers, there is an opportunity that they may be able to displace maybe a third-party product that they're using today that VMware could handle.
And I almost feel like the bundling aspect, and maybe this is a poor analogy or puts it in a poor light, but it's one way to look at it, where the cable companies with their bundles, right? You used to have like 3 tiers of channels, and whether you wanted HGTV or not, you're getting HGTV if you buy for, apparently, Celebrate too. Yes, thank you for the effect there. But then people said, well, if I could only buy this channel or that channel, that would be preferable. And the people who would warn against that would say, that's great, but you're not subsidizing other content, this and that, and you're going to end up paying, if you end up buying just the channels you want, that's going to end up being more than just buying the bundle. And I think VMware is kind of making it the same approach, where all of these SKUs, being able to develop them and add features and support them, they're able to do that better by bundling them together, and then hoping that you'll tune in and watch that channel and really, sometimes, maybe become a fan of that. And I think that's kind of the approach here, instead of piecemealing it, is encouraging the growth of the overall platform and the use by whittling down the packages, but adding more into each one of them.
Well, that is a really good response to that question. But what about, and I think Doug mentioned this, what about a customer who's just using vSphere today and really isn't ready to adopt all of the other technologies?
Yeah, I think that is really kind of the bit of the line in the sand, where you just have to look in the mirror and say, what are my requirements, right? So an Enterprise Plus customer today, and we would look at, okay, vSphere Foundation is your most lateral move. Sure. Okay, that's just not paddleable, don't want it. What is less? Really, the drop down from that is obviously, as you can see on the screen here, vSphere Standard. And it really has two caveats. You have to ask yourself, how much do I love DRS and how much do I love or need DV switch? Those are really the two big things that you are leaving out in vSphere Standard. DRS being that dynamic resource scheduler. So think putting a host in maintenance mode and walking away until a host is in maintenance mode. That's DRS basically migrating virtual machines from the host to be put in maintenance mode onto surviving hosts in a balanced way. DV switch is distributed virtual switch. NSX relies on it, but if you've got a large number of hosts and port groups, you have to create that port group, a new port group once, and it applies to all the hosts. There are some network shaping and throttling and I/O enhancements with DV switch, some security enhancements. But outside of that, if you're using vSwitch standard vSwitches, then you're not even talking about DV switch. Okay, there's nothing to miss there. And from a DRS standpoint, if your workloads are fairly stable and you don't need to worry about automatically moving one VM here to this host as resources do this throughout the day, if your workload is fairly narrow, then maybe DRS isn't something you need to really worry about either. Maybe when you put a host in maintenance mode for patching, now you're just manually dragging VMs to surviving hosts on your own. Really, so it's quality of life stuff with DRS, I think, depending on your workload. DV switch, I think you either need it or you don't. But outside of that, vSphere Standard is Essentials Plus without DV switch and DRS, more or less. And that's the question, right? I mean, if you need DRS and you need DV switch, the answer is the answer. If you don't, you can certainly explore the standard SKU.
I want to address the elephant in the room. And we had a question on this. And so we've heard that the new subscription pricing is something like, I've heard different things tossed out, like 2x, 3x, what a customer is currently paying for their annual investment in VMware. I know that you guys have been quoting a lot of new subscriptions for customers. What are you seeing in terms of pricing that can help our audience understand what they might be looking at as their renewals or their licenses expire?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, Connie, that's the biggest challenge that customers are facing today is the cost, the annual cost changes. And I would say that it is kind of, unfortunately, it's good news, bad news. Is everybody is in a different, is different. I've seen anywhere from, if it's not too much more, to 3 and 4x. And why the big variance? Because if you have a customer today that has invested in Enterprise Plus and some vSAN and are in operations management, if they already got those components of the suite, for example, that cost delta is, previously they were all a la carte licensing and they had a renewal cost for Enterprise Plus and a separate one for operations management, another one for vSAN. So if for those, unfortunately, small number of customers, that cost delta is not that great, or I should say I have seen it where it's not that big of a delta. For customers that have just been a vSphere Enterprise Plus customer, for example, perpetual licensing, everybody the cost to renew a CPU of Enterprise Plus, $800 or $900 a year roughly, and to move from that to now a core-based license under vSphere Foundation, for example, it can be, because unfortunately you're kind of starting over. The one frustration that customers have is Broadcom has not given a really a discount or an incentive or a path to move from perpetual to subscription. It is everybody's in the same boat. So you're basically starting over with no matter how much you've invested with VMware in the past, under your perpetual licensing, everybody is starting over. So from zero to whatever they fall into, that can be a dramatic difference from just an annual renewal cost. And then I've got customers that have, let's say, 20 CPUs of licenses today, and they've standardized on 16 core per CPU servers. And I've got a different customer that has the same number of CPUs, but they've standardized on 28 or 32 core CPUs. That is a 2x difference just in those two customers. So it has caught everybody off guard, certainly with the impact, and that core count now is, we all have been through it with, Microsoft did it with SQL. We've seen Oracle do it. So for years, customers were playing with where's that fine line between cores and, to try to keep those costs down.
Well, and it didn't do anybody any favors, given that prior to Broadcom's acquisition, VMware introduced a few years ago the maximum core count per socket license, right? So you could have it, whether you had a 16-core CPU or a 32-core CPU, you would still need just one socket license for vSphere, like Enterprise Plus. So 32 is a magic number. If you had a 36-core CPU, you'd have to buy 2 socket licenses. So some customers who needed it ran up and built out servers with 32-core CPUs, even if they didn't need them, because they said, hey, now my CPU capacity is expanded if I need it, and it didn't cost me any more in licensing. Broadcom, with the acquisition, and I think you alluded to it, Doug, the immediacy of the change, I think, without any kind of, transition or a grace or a year-long heads up maybe, all of a sudden, oops, you might not have needed those 32 cores, but now you're buying them. And so, I mean, who knows? We've talked to customers about the possibility in that case where maybe you overboard one of your CPUs and pull it out in the short term, and if you don't require all of that horsepower. But that's been kind of a dovetail of unfortunate occurrence there, that people ramped up towards that 32 and away from that 16 minimum, and now they're having to buy those cores.
Yeah, it did feel kind of like ripping off the Band-Aid, right, for everybody all at once.
It hasn't really helped either that VMware is the last one out of the gate to subscription. However we feel about subscriptions, I mean, we've seen the industry largely go in that direction. VMware is Broadcom's kind of the last one out of the barn, but everyone's still got all the anger built up, I think, or the frustration from it, and so they're catching a lot of that too. And they haven't done themselves any favors with some of the execution, as we talked about, but yeah, that just because they're last doesn't mean they're immune to it.
Well, I think some good news on pricing. Doug, you might know more about this. We've heard that there is some pretty aggressive pricing or discounts out there for customers who will be willing to commit to a 3-year subscription model. Can you talk about that? What have you been seeing or hearing?
Yeah. So with the subscription, it's as of now, it's really 1 year or 3 years are the options. So I have a number of customers that have looked at both, and if you looked at a 3-year subscription cost today, it's really just over if you took the 2-year cost. It's really buy 2 years and you get the third for free is how the math really close to works out today. So it's a pretty substantial cost savings. Now the caveat to that, even though this is a subscription, as of today, you have to pay for that up front. So for customers that, hey, we didn't even budget for our 1-year subscription, we certainly didn't budget for a 3-year, obviously that's a challenge. So thankfully, or what we I don't know if everybody has heard, VMware is going into a full company shutdown later this month, and they are moving into the transition of moving all the back-end systems, everything coming out of that under Broadcom, and what VMware is calling day 2, which is anywhere, I think May 6th was the original target date. Let's say sometime early to mid-May is when doors will open back up. Now, one of the things that they have talked about for quite some time is Broadcom has, at least within the Broadcom family and portfolio of subscriptions today, customers have the ability to say, you know what, I will do a 3-year commitment, but there's an option to pay that annually. So if that is truly the case and that comes out of this day 2, I think that will be a big deal for a lot of customers. Now, we're not sure is my annual 3-year cost, is it simply the 3-year upfront divided by 3, or is there going to be a slight uplift? We don't know that, but we do know a 3-year commitment with annual payments is going to be less than doing a 1-year, a yearly subscription. So anxious to see, how some of those things are ironed out here in the next month or so when they open back up.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of gearing up for what this looks like when the systems are merged and it's truly a unified organization with VMware Broadcom. Something that you might be able to help with, Matt, and there's a lot of questions in the Q&A about this. There's a lot of conversation that started, when the acquisition closed and customers started thinking about alternatives to VMware. With these changes, it creates a lot of, you brought it up, a lot of anxiety over pricing, and now I'm limited to the features and the bundles. What is IVOXY's take on the alternatives to VMware, like Nutanix or Hyper-V, or maybe some open source solutions that are out there?
A great question, Connie. I'm going to be as sensitive but plain as possible in talking about this. And the nice thing about IVOXY Consulting is our team of consultants, we are both a hive mind and not, right? We are shared knowledge base, but we all have different experiences and different opinions and different expertise, which is great. So what I'm saying here, I might pull Matt Cozzolino next to me and he's going to be sitting here shaking his head, or I disagree, and that's, I look at that as a strength. So I want to qualify that this is but one person's opinion. Anybody who knows me might consider me strongly opinionated. So usually when I say something, it's not said lightly or without some thought ahead of time. But that being said, I just want to do a little disclaimer. But overall, the reason VMware becoming the out and out front runner in the hypervisor, when we talk about vSphere, it's much more than the hypervisor, right? But really, we all start with that hypervisor layer. It's dominant for a reason. There were, we weren't talking about some kind of antitrust monopoly thing where they used, uncouth business practices to wedge in. I mean, it is the #1 hypervisor for merit, right? For good reason. And you talk about the level of APIs that have been developed to allow products and partners to integrate with VMware at the storage level, at the networking level, at the endpoint level. All of these things have made it enterprise ready, and everything else seems to be up to this point a pretender. And this exercise has forced us to look at what else could be, like you said, Connie, what could be the alternatives. And I feel like everywhere we look, we might get a couple of steps down that road and say, oh, maybe, and then you're just hit with the hard dose of reality. And everybody I'm sure has not the same experiences as I, but something like I've had experience working with Hyper-V, where if you look at features, you look at, Microsoft Collateral, yeah, we do that. Try it. try it in practice. What is it like working on it day to day? And you're like, I mean, technically it works kind of if you do it this way. It's that, I've had that experience. I would say Microsoft might have one of the more similar levels of capabilities. Like, okay, one of our partners, Rubrik, right? Fantastic data protection platform. It works with Hyper-V as well, a little bit differently than VMware, but yes, it's compatible. You talk about the open source products, Connie, and I spend quite a bit of time online, and you see a lot of emotional responses. I'm done with VMware, that's it. I get the emotional reaction, right? But ultimately, you have to make a logical decision, not an emotional decision when it comes to what's right for my business. And my 2-node home lab, I'm trying this, I'm doing that. And if it crashes at 4 a.m., I'm still sleeping until I wake up in the morning. But, enterprise is far different. XCP-NG, open source version of Citrix Zen Server that kind of got mothballed. Okay, let's look at that. It's got a maximum VHD for a virtual disk file size of 2 terabytes. And the workaround is, oh, you can software RAID them within the VM. And I'm just like, whoo boy, like this is supposed to be like a competitor, like there are so many shortcomings like that will trip you up, where VMware is just far and above. One of my favorite conversations to have is the Nutanix or hyperconverged discussion. Again, personal feelings certainly, but I wish the Nutanix conversation was just hypervisor. I wish it were an apples to apples discussion, because you could make the argument that Acropolis hypervisor is a robust alternative to VMware. You could, and VMware or Nutanix has done a good job building an ecosystem there, but it's not. They get the Acropolis hypervisor and load it on your bare metal servers and bring your external storage. Can't. It's a hyper-converged model. So you're not just talking about switching hypervisors, you're talking about switching your architecture completely. And if you're a listener to Data Center Therapy over the last few years, we've done some podcasts on hyper-converged and had kind of a battle royale of why you would use this and why I don't think it's a great idea for most use cases. I'm transparent about that with my customers. And am I saying there are no use cases for hyperconverged? Absolutely not. There are. It wouldn't exist if it wasn't a valid model. At the same time, you see companies coming out with DHCI. What's DHCI? Disaggregated hyperconverged. Oh, so I get to use the HCI label for the sexiestness. What's DHCI? It's split out storage and compute, and it's what came before HCI. So all of that saying that there is no like-for-like drop-in with the enterprise capabilities or the support. Proxmox, good luck working in Austria hours if you need support. Like, that's just but one thing. And who backs up KVM-based hypervisors? Well, the enterprise players really don't right now. So it's not so much, even if you could find a hypervisor that ran VMs, great. But what about protecting that, or the integration with storage and all of that wrapped around it that makes vSphere kind of the answer right now? And being a tech enthusiast too, right? Being a solutions architect, I would love for someone to put something in front of me and say, aha, this could be. I haven't heard it where I'm confident turning around and saying, yeah, I would recommend this and put my name on it also. Well,
Matt, isn't probably Hyper-V about as close as anything, but doesn't Microsoft, their plans for Hyper-V that's not their future direction. They've dropped the
standalone Hyper-V role where you basically have to still install full-fledged Windows and do all of that. And then there's still, depending on who you hear from, some people will say Hyper-V's dead, and some people say, no, it's not dead. They just took away that standalone role. I think the writing's on the wall. They want Azure Stack HCI to be their version of things forward. Listen, are these companies going to backpedal and see an opportunity and maybe go in a different direction? Sure. I think I've used the phrase, you put a gun to my head today and say, Matt, give me an alternative now. I'm holding my nose with the world's biggest clothespin and probably saying Hyper-V. But I'm not happy about it. but yeah, I mean, there are a lot of reasons why even that, Doug, is, I feel like it's quicksand under my feet, and it's just another couple of years before we're exploring something else, possibly.
Well, I've also seen tossed out that Kubernetes might be a viable alternative. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, containerization of workloads is, again, it's kind of like the HCI argument where it's not just, oh, I'm just going to convert this virtual machine to a container and be done with it. It's a complete refactoring of the application if it's available, if it applies. So containers can be an alternative to a full fat virtual machine. They may not be in play either. I still haven't seen, at least among our user base, a huge, you see a lot of containers with DevOps, or if the applications require it. But if you're in infrastructure and you're running workloads, maybe those workloads are going to come and containerize at some point. Maybe they don't. They probably don't right now. So that's, I mean, as much as it could be an alternative, in some cases, it's likely not a panacea where it's like, okay, everybody off the island, we're all over here now.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you guys both, I think, touched on this, but VMware seems to be moving ever more toward a cloud or hybrid cloud strategy. What's our position on a hybrid cloud architecture for customers?
You want me to take that one, Doug, or do you want to chat?
You start.
All right. So I will say this. One thing that I've really appreciated about at least VMware's stance about hybrid cloud is hybrid cloud. So much of cloud messaging seems to be get it all up there in the hyperscalers. And if you want to spend 4 times as much money by running your 24/7 VMs up there, they'll take your money, sure. And good luck getting it out, right? And that whole aspect, the old Hotel California. But VMware, with the messaging about hybrid cloud, hybrid recognizes on-premise data centers, yours, DR, whichever, working with cloud where it makes sense. That I appreciate, because as hot as a topic as cloud has been for 6, 7, 8 years now, and it's always a discussion, it all boils down to, what am I trying to achieve with a migration to any, outside of a data center I might have on premise? Is it going to be, do I need additional performance? Do I need additional elasticity or flexibility? Or do I need to save cost? And if you boil it down to what the direction and the drive for exploring cloud is, you might very soon end up as in, this is not the best option. So the idea that VMware still, they're not looking to just use this as a wedge to break you off and push you into the cloud, the hyperscaler cloud, that to me, it's a little bit of a relief, because I think it's a little bit of sanity in the, no matter who you are, the cloud is the best option for you marketing world that we seem to live in right now.
Well, and I think, again, VMware's vision of VCF is, build the private cloud, build that first, and what is not yet available but is soon to be announced or released or supported is the ability, again, everything's a subscription now, so the vision is take that VCF that you've built for the on-prem. Now, if you need to take that workload or a portion of that workload and you want to send it up to Azure, AWS, GCP, is now you're taking that portable license and you're going to those hyperscalers, and now you're just taking that and putting it on bare metal. You're not having to go to the whole Azure stack. You can just take the bare metal, bring your VCF license with you, and have that portability of, you go to Azure, and then for whatever reason that you need to bring it back, you need to then take it to AWS. So that flexibility is the vision. I think the challenge for many customers is the journey to get there. It's not going to be a trivial process, but that's the overall vision of what VMware is trying trying to build. And they still have their partnerships and relationships with both AWS and Azure about running, you know, VMware Cloud on AWS, where you're actually going to AWS and running it on vSphere. They've got a similar but a little bit different offering with Microsoft and with the Azure VMware Services, AVS. You know, so you can still run, you know, native VMware inside those public clouds too.
You know, one of the things we haven't talked about, and we have some questions in the Q&A about this, is the VMware end user compute business line or business unit. So I know that I'm looking for here we go. We just recently, and I mean in the last couple of days.
Very recently.
Yeah, we just found out that the end user compute business unit that was sold off, just so everybody knows, Broadcom was able successfully to sell that business unit as a separate entity to a venture capital firm called KKR, and the deal should close sometime this year. But that whole end user compute product line has been rebranded as Omnissa. And Matt or Doug, do you have any feedback on that, or have you been working with customers on that? I put that slide up here so that our customers can see, you know, what that end user compute business unit looks like.
Yeah, thanks. I would say that was of all the initial changes, I think that one we didn't see coming. I think Horizon has, you know, I've got a number of customers that have very invested in Horizon as a critical component of how they do business today. You know, so was a little concerned or surprised when we saw that Horizon and Workspace ONE, that's kind of what makes up that EUC group was from day one was kind of spun off and under its own business unit. The other group that was kind of siloed to begin with was Carbon Black on the security endpoint side. Now we've got a little bit more as customers that have invested in Carbon Black. That is still going to be under Broadcom, but really going to kind of morph and mold in with Symantec somehow. So I think there's still some questions regarding what the longevity of Carbon Black and how that's going to fit in with Broadcom and Symantec. But on the Horizon front, excited that they have, you know, fairly quickly been able to spin that off under KKR. I wasn't familiar with who KKR was, a large private equity firm. And if you look at their website, they've got 150, 200 companies under that portfolio. And it sounds like their model is invest and leave those companies to run on their own. I talked to someone on that end user compute team recently, and they're excited to kind of have the separation, and we're going to be on our own. They actually are hiring. They're trying to grow because I think they're trying to really, you know, certainly I think they'd be more successful on their own than trying to be under the coattails of Broadcom, not thinking they're a very integral part of their vision. But for customers of Horizon today, there's some good news, and then there's some worrisome news, I should say. The good news is VMware, I don't know if forced is the right word, but forced. Customers a couple of years ago that were Horizon customers, they already had moved to a subscription-based licensing. So customers had already kind of done that migration, you know, 1 or 2 years ago. So for the ones that are on Horizon, we have not seen nearly the price annual cost delta that we've seen on the infrastructure side. So from that standpoint, it's positive. I think where most customers are I guess, concerned or asking a lot of questions is, hey, with my Horizon licenses today, I get entitlement to all the licensing to run the backend infrastructure. I get vSphere, I get vCenter, I get all the components. You know, as long as I'm building my own VDI dedicated cluster, I don't have to license vSphere separately. I don't have to license vCenter separately. I get that all under my Horizon, and that's a imperative part of that licensing model. And I think, you know, we have been told that there was an OEM agreement in place, that Omnissa, you know, is still going to have those entitlements. They're still going, you know, VMware is still going to be part of that Horizon licensing. And as long as that is true long term, I think the impact from a cost standpoint is going to be minimal for most Horizon customers.
And I think the rub, though, too, Doug, is the fact that you can only run your VDI workload on it might make it more protected, right? The fact that you'd be violating your license if you were to run general purpose VMs or whatever on there, you cannot do already, might make it so there is not another shoe to drop, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. And you could imagine when Broadcom was putting a for sale sign on the EUC group with an OEM agreement in place is worth X. If they said, oh yeah, here's we're trying to sell off the EUC and there's no agreement long term with the vSphere components, you can imagine that is going to yield a very different value to that company. So I certainly don't think that it's in that Broadcom obviously realized that we're going to have to be as little impact and let them be successful on their own. So hopefully that. Now, again, is that a 3-year, 5-year, 10-year in perpetuity agreement? I guess nobody knows, but we'll see. And I don't know. Maybe someday would Horizon run on top of a different hypervisor? I don't know.
That is interesting to think about, but hopefully we'll get some more updates as time goes on. This is all very fresh on the EUC side. So, you know, those are the questions that I have for you guys. But what I'd like to do now is if we could answer some of the questions that are in Q&A that we didn't address. So I've just got a few. And one of the questions is, what will be the equivalent solution for the remote office, branch office customers, or Robo?
Currently, Robo is the 25 VM pack stuff, right, Doug?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think depending on the size of the cluster, you're probably looking at something like the Essentials Plus kit, most likely, out of there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a good answer today. You know, because as you know, the limitation to those Essentials Plus is it's got its own little vCenter that runs just those Essentials Plus. So you can't run your Essentials Plus licensing under a standard vCenter where you can with those Robo 25
right.
packs. So
or spread
yeah, that is that is certainly an area of a gap where those 25 packs were amazing. They were great, where it was a right fit for customers that, I mean, I've got a customer that has, just a half dozen VMs in 4 or 5 locations, and it was perfect for that.
Here's another question. Is the free hypervisor ESXi for free, is that gone? Is that
gone?
Still available?
Gone. They've discontinued it. And I will say this, and I don't know, I don't think there's any Broadcom employees on, but I'd be happy if there were. What are you doing, folks? In that, I from a standpoint of Apple IIe in the 1980s when I was in elementary school, yeah, everybody had an Apple. Guess what I wanted to use when I was, I wanted to type on Apple. Google's trying it right now, giving Chromebooks out to everybody, and trying to get people, hooked on the Google ecosystem. Allow enthusiasts to use your product to gain skills, so when they go to school or graduate from school and go into the workforce, they've got your skills for your product built in and say, hey, Mr. Manager, I can use this. I haven't been able to find a reason to, from a business standpoint, why that was the decision made. Maybe they'll turn back. They brought back VMware Flings, oddly enough, which is kind of like their experimental labs thing, but killing FreeSXI, I don't really understand. Now, Hypervisor did the same, or Microsoft did the same thing for Hyper-V. So I don't know what's going on here with that, but as a tech enthusiast, I don't see why.
So I have another question for you. I'm going to say as written. How would you argue the move from Hyper-V to VMware with the new cost increases?
I would say, one, it's not simply a cost proposition, right? I mean, that is going to be a point of the discussion that you're going to have to justify if the value is worth it from a Hyper-V that you might already be paying for with your data center licensing with Microsoft, right? So you look at it basically from a strict technical standpoint, where I would say VMware is head and shoulders above Microsoft Hyper-V from a hypervisor standpoint and ecosystem standpoint. From that point, you can have any number of discussions based on what your needs are. Your technical footprint might be very small with vSphere, or you might be talking about, let's look at NSX and network virtualization and the ability to run a DR plan and fail over your networks from. All of those things are potential talking points. At the end of the day, you line up your use case and say, okay, is that worth this many dollars, whatever that delta is? And you just have to make a judgment based on, and a lot of times that's people far higher pay grades than we all make to make those decisions. But that would be my selling approach, is I could just, what is the use case, and then is that worth whatever the dollar investment is, and go from there.
Great. I think we have one more question before our drawing. So I want to, there was a question about add-ons, and is it possible to add VDS to vSphere Standard, or is that limited now?
Great question. I'm guessing you mean the DV switch?
It says VDS.
VDS, vSphere Distributed Switch, I would say that is. Or let's say DRS. Let's just pick them. Unfortunately, no. They are not add-on items. Basically, you can't add anything to vSphere Standard. If you have Standard and you want to do vSAN, you're at least at VVF, the vSphere Foundation, right? So the add-ons really are for VVF and VCF. Those are where add-ons come into play. Specifically to vSAN, Doug, you made mention that VVF comes with 100 gigabytes of vSAN per core. vSphere Cloud Foundation, VCF, comes with 1 terabyte of capacity per core. With VVF, that 100 gigs per core should be considered a sampling. And let's say you bought 200 cores of VVF. Well, you get 20 terabytes of vSAN capacity. If you need 22, you have to buy 22 at 1 terabyte in 1 terabyte increments, and you start from zero. You don't go on top of the 20 that comes with your core licensing. So the add-on thing is a discussion point. We're pretty steeped in what the options are after going through some of the literature and going through a couple of exercises with some customers. The NSX firewall, the distributed firewall, that is a add-on SKU to VCF. Things like that are little caveats. You get all the north-south routing, load balancing, a lot of that stuff, but NSX firewall is an add-on. So based on what you're looking for, there are some, like they have gradually dramatically reduced the SKUs, like you said, Doug, but it's a little more than 4 right now. There's still some add-ons.
Yeah.
And we
and I would
would
say,
love to have conversations with you guys, with our audience, to address your specific needs. So before we do the drawing, Doug, do you have any closing remarks?
yeah, two quick things. I would say, I would say one, I guess, positive, maybe for some customers that I've talked to out of these discussions is, again, I think customers have invested in, their VMware investments go back years and years and years. And again, the cost to renew support on an annual basis was pretty modest for, hey, my server has 2 CPUs. It was just a small number. So I think a lot of customers are now going to look, it's like, do we really need all that hardware that we've traditionally kept running in the data center? Maybe some workloads have moved to the cloud. They're under, SaaS-based version. Stuff is moving out of the data center, yet they hadn't really changed their physical hardware footprint. Customers are asking, and we're helping them look, is from a resource standpoint, maybe you could peel off 1 or 2 servers. And when you start looking at, that's anywhere from, 32 to 64 cores, that adds up a lot quicker than it did under a perpetual license renewal. So would love to have conversations with customers and help look and do some analysis of, from a resource standpoint, maybe we don't need to run as much hardware as we have in the past. Another question I still get often from, or not often, but periodically from customers is, hey, can you help? I need a temp license. We are doing something. And back in the day, VMware made that very easy for us as a partner. We could provide those. They cut this off. This was well before Broadcom. This was going back probably close to 2 years from now. But there is still for customers that need a temporary license for, I don't want to say for whatever reason, but if you do need, let us know. There is a process to go through it. We just need to work with the local account team, and it's a pretty quick and easy process to do. So temporary licenses are still an option for short term, obviously.
Good to know. Matt, what would you say as a close to our customers?
Overall, it's difficult from my point because you can look at it from a number of reasons. You look at it technically, you can look at it the business aspect, the approach, how much control do we have over that? But all of it's very empathetic, right? From the emotional standpoint, if you're paying more for what you're getting today than you were yesterday, that's a net negative. Like you said, Doug, the support cost has been relatively modest. I think one of the biggest disservices has happened here that kind of helps shape a more negative tone on things has been allowing the term renewal to be attached to what the subscription. Oh, my renewal quadrupled. No, it didn't. The renewal. There is no more renewal. The product is deprecated, and now the switch to subscription. And I just think that's caused more pain than I think needed to happen with the messaging. VMware, the writing was on the wall for a while with vSphere Plus. They were offering a subscription. By no means were they forcing you into that. And I think the abrupt, violent nature of all these things happening within a very short window was the bomb going off, right? And the good news is we've seen changes in the last few months. We've seen things that went out of the gate. There was a certain message like, this is how it is, no exceptions, everybody on board tomorrow. We've seen a softening of that over the past few months. We've seen, and Doug alluded to the day 2, now they're going to allow yearly payments on a 3-year term. That was not going to be allowed. That was not going to be allowed. There was just an interview that came out with Hock Tan there, I think, what is it, Thursday, early last week, talking about customers that were up for renewal during this transitionary period. There were exceptions being made to allow for the perpetual stuff to be renewed, where out of the gate, nope, we're done, you're dead. So hopefully we're seeing, they're not operating in a bubble. they're in an industry that anybody can break it down if they start to work in their garage and start tooling around. Competition's good for all of us. So, you know, maybe we see what happens here, but hopefully at the end of the day, it's an improved experience. And I will say this does not appear to be an acquisition that's meant to solely extract value and then dump the carcass on the side of the road. They seem to be doubling down on investment in the company and the technology stack. As a virtualization enthusiast, I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I think we have and will continue to see a softening in some of those absolute policies that we thought were going to be very harsh. I think that Broadcom is really listening to partners and to customers. So I think, you know, some of those things may change as we move deeper into the merger of the system.
And the bottom line is, I'm an advocate for my customers, not for Broadcom, not for any of our partners. We are blessed to be able to have a dealer's choice of partner offerings because we have integrity and we're honest to our customers' requirements and needs, right? And that aligns with a small subset of industry technologies, right? Having said that, if an alternative comes up or whatever, that we're always looking for the best answer for our customers, not the best answer for any particular technology. And I can sit here in the catbird seat and say that's the absolute truth. So whatever the right technology solution is the one I'm going to stand behind, and hopefully that works for our customers as well. Yeah.
That's wonderful, Matt. Thank you so much. I want to announce the winner of our solo stove drawing so that you can get your summer off to a great start with those backyard campfires is John Runyon. So John Runyon, we will reach out to you and arrange to get your stove to you personally. So thank you everyone for attending. We really appreciate your time. We will follow up with people from the chat with questions that we did not address during this webinar. And please look for an email or outreach from your account manager who invited you to this event to maybe schedule a follow-up discussion with you about your unique situation and how we can help you maximize your VMware investment. It's very important for us to help you realize the most value for your investment with VMware and all of the technologies that we provide. So look for that. And once again, thank you so much for attending. We look forward to working with you more on this. Bye, everyone.